before passing towards the turbines. The steam generated from fission passes through the turbine, after which it goes to a condenser to be returned back to water. Inside the condenser, a secondary loop of water is used and is kept separate from the primary to stop cross-contamination. At Fukushima, seawater was used for condenser cooling water and auxiliary equipment cooling water. A seawall 10 metres high from the seabed was built in front of the power station, with open channels behind it that led from the power plant to the ocean. Water was drawn in through sluice gates and pump rooms installed for each unit. From there it is transferred to the condenser by pumps installed in the pump room. Fuel used at Fukushima consisted of fuel pins bundled in square arrays. The fuel pins consist of low enrichment uranium oxide or mixed uranium and plutonium oxide, fuel pellets enclosed and sealed in zirconium alloy cladding tubes. Each of the reactors had control rods for regulating the power and had 97, 137 and 185 across the 3 different PWR types. The rods were inserted into the reactor from underneath. The control rods had the ability to scram the reactors, shutting down fission in an event of an emergency. In the event of a power cut, backup power is generated from diesel power generators. This backup system was important for powering the plant in the event of an emergency. The reactors have 2 types of containment. The first being the reactor primary containment vessel, the second being the building in which it is housed. The core is kept within a containment vessel. Around the vessel there is an outer containment which is enclosed by a concrete plug. The plug can be moved by a crane over the spent fuel pool. The spent fuel pools is where used fuel rods can be stored. The PCV has 2 major compartments. The reactor vessel is located in the dry well. The DW is connected to a second compartment, the suppression chamber, which holds a large amount of water and enough space to suppress pressure increases. The water within the suppression chamber can be used to scrub radioisotopes from any gases released within the containment vessel. The primary containment vessels were filled with nitrogen to provide prompt control of any hydrogen generated during an incident. The secondary confinement is provided by the reactor building itself and is designed to try and hold any contaminant in a last line of defence of environmental protection. The site had 3 control rooms as each was used to control 2 reactors. Although each reactor had its own panel, this setup allowed close working between reactor teams. Each reactor's emergency diesel generators and associated equipment were stored underneath the turbine buildings between 7 to 8 metres below grade. The backup power systems also used DC batteries. These were located in the basements of the control buildings for units 1, 2 and 4 and in the mezzanine levels of the turbine buildings for units 3, 5 and 6. Units 1 to 5 had 2 diesel generators each and Unit 6 had 3. The batteries gave the power plant up to 8 hours of emergency power in the case of electrical isolation from the grid. Issues were raised by some engineers during construction as placement of safety critical equipment below grade had a higher risk of flooding, especially when combined with the lower bluff of the site. However, these issues were swept away by TEPCO's decision to follow the design plans to the letter, and oh boy, that would come back to bite them.
I'll handle this.
This leads us to March 2011. 3 of the 6 units were shut down for refuelling, leaving 1, 2 and 3 in operation.
I'm back.
There were some 6,400 workers on site, approximately 2,400 consisting of 750 TEPCO personnel and around 1,650 contractors were working in the controlled area, with approximately 2,000 carrying out work in the support of the planned refuelling. Unit 4 had its fuel rods removed, and Units 5 and 6 still had their fuel elements inside the reactors, however the control rods were inserted into the core to stop fission. On the 11th of March at 14:46 local time, an earthquake of a magnitude of 9 lasted for 2 minutes. It was caused by a sudden release of energy at the interface where the Pacific tectonic plate forces its way under the North American plate. The earthquake was the largest ever recorded in Japan and the world's 4th largest since records began in 1900. At the time of the earthquake, sensors at the plant detected ground movement and initiated a scram in the 3 operating reactors. This was built into the design of the plant and the action controlled the reactor's reactivity. The off-site power grid connections were lost during the earthquake. Because of this, the emergency systems needed power to be supplied by the 13 on-site generators. Even after shutdown, the reactors needed power to monitor and pump coolant through the cores, as after fission, the fuel elements still provide decay heat strong enough to cause fuel element melting. To help with the cooling in normal shutdown, the turbines are bypassed and the coolant in steam form goes straight to the condensers, after which it is pumped back to the core, completing the cycle. However, during this event, the reactor was completely isolated from the turbine building due to the loss of power caused by the earthquake. With the usual way of cooling now isolated, a backup system using the suppression pool was used. Unit 1 used a different system to the remaining reactors. They used 2 closed cooling loops by sending the primary coolant through a heat exchanger, using a secondary tank of cooling water. Once the heat was exchanged from the reactor coolant to the secondary water, the primary coolant then returned to the reactor via gravity. However, this system was cooling down the reactor too efficiently. Fearing damage to the reactor vessel from extreme heat changes, one of the systems was turned off. This was set out in the operational procedures. For Units 2 and 3, an open system was used which necessitated additional water. This was powered by steam from the primary coolant turning a small turbine, which in turn injected water back into the reactor. The steam that ran the turbine went to and accumulated in the suppression pool inside the primary containment vessel, which served as a heat sink for absorbing the waste heat. The water needed to continue cooling the reactor was supplied from a condensate tank. Once the tank was empty and the suppression pool was full, water was then supplied from the pool for cooling. However, not only the operating reactors on the 11th of March had decayed heat. During refuelling, the spent fuel rods are placed in pools near each reactor. These are also still hot, so effective cooling is normally provided by electrical power.
Clutch.
Everyone makes fun of German efficiency. Ha ha. Just keep laughing as you use all my gear. Fight! Wall raised.
Placing sentry.
One enemy remaining. Spike down A.
Spike spotted A.
Reloading! If you're not being shot at, you're doing something wrong.
Together! Barrier created.
Turret out.
Enemy spotted B. Enemy spotted mid.
You should run.
Initiated. Reloaded.
Spike planted.
Placing sentry.
Last player standing. Team Ace.
I don't care if there are 5 of them or 50 of them. Let's go.
planted. One enemy remaining.
Change of plans.
I hate waiting. Let's do this.
Turret out.
Wall raised. Swarm grenade out.
Spike planted.
Finished. That's done. Ugh.
Flash out. Blinding.
One enemy remaining.
Come on, come on.
Enemy in attack spawn.
Clutch. Defenders win.
We move forward.